Hey everyone, and welcome back. Last time we went over a bunch of the labels and kind of how labels on video games changed over the years. This time I just kind of wanted to expand on it because really got interested in the topic and kind of wanted to go over some other things like, rental labels on video games, a little bit about how they tried to solve piracy. It's not just in the rental industry, but also with, some of the things that Nintendo did. So we're going to be going over just, rental labels. We're going to talk a little bit about how people used to mark the games, like write their names on them, or in one case, carved their initials into them. It's kind of a weird game that I have. So some of the people I know like to take the labels off, or they like to clean the cartridges, just so that they look more pristine and new. That's not really what I like to do. I like to leave all those things on there because it kind of tells more of the history of where the game came from and that sort of thing. So normally I find rental labels on the sides of games, but every once in a while they'll be on the back or they'll be on the front. It's kind of crazy just where you'll find these things. And they're all from either, Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, or in some really cool cases, they're from like these tiny little stores that don't exist anymore, and it's just so cool to actually like really see what's going on with them and talk a little bit more about where those stores were and kind of what happened with them. A lot of the reasons that you find these rental stickers on the sides of the games is sort of like an anti-theft device for these rental stores. They wanted to be able to make sure that somebody didn't take the game home and then swap the ROM board out with a game that they didn't really care about anymore. That's just one of the weird things that I know about. I do know a few people who have done it, but I personally never really cared about it. I mean, I was just so excited to rent a game that I never really even looked at that stuff. You can see here with like some of the unlicensed games, this was really the way that you found out about them. At least that's the way I found out about a lot of the unlicensed games, was really renting them in the stores. Blockbuster here, my God, I don't understand why the hell they slapped this thing like right over the label of the game, but Blockbuster did that and it generally just kind of pisses me off. This was an unlicensed game that I never really thought was going to be in Blockbuster, but you could kind of see that's left of a label on there. I have always wondered just how many of these stores are actually still in existence. Like, what they actually turned into, or if they, just got out of retro video games and replaced their their stock with, newer games or that sort of thing. It's just I've always wanted to like sit down and actually call up some of these places, but I don't want to like call up an actual business and just harass them and be like, hey, is this such and such's rental store or something like that. And with a lot of the Blockbuster locations, there's no way for you to actually get those back. So it's just one of the cool parts of, really video game history, because it brings up, like, the old rental stores and different ways that people use video games. It also tells you a lot about, how many of these rental stores there were prior to Blockbuster, and how many of them even existed. You can't really tell at the same time as Blockbuster, but you can kind of tell, they did exist for a long period of time. But yeah, these labels, they're just kind of another way to, add on to the history of a game. Going past like the stories of the developers, the people that made the game, that marketed it, you get into sort of the stories of the actual video games themselves, like who bought them, where did they go, and once they hit the secondary market, what kind of happened to them from there. So you can kind of see here a few of like the early ways that games were really put together. These are the 5-screw games, and you could actually open one of these up with just a regular flathead screwdriver or like a small Phillips. That was kind of the way that you swapped your game boards out back in the day. So what Nintendo did, and what also the rental stores did, the rental stores would add the actual label on the side so they would know if you tampered with the game. Nintendo added the bit drivers on there, so it was a lot harder for you to really open them up back in the day if you didn't have a bit driver that fit that one. The unlicensed games didn't have that. They had just sort of like a regular screwdriver. It's kind of hard to see, but you can tell they didn't really, have the same stuff. Here's an example of one where somebody did open it up and apparently lost the screws, so they just went ahead and put two different ones in the holes. It's kind of weird. So we talked about the rental stuff, and now we kind of get into some of the ways that people would mark their games. The most common one I've seen is just people writing a name on there, so just their first name. I've seen a few, like once or twice, where they put their entire name on there and like an address as well, which I thought was a little egregious. Mostly because you're really just lending these out to your friends and whatnot. So there's really no reason to go that crazy on it. It's just one of those weird things. So people did that, and when you rent those out to your friends, they kind of get a reminder of, hey, this one was kind of weird for me because I had never seen someone carve their initials into a video game like this before. It was just kind of a weird thing, and I just really wanted to highlight that one because I thought, you couldn't really find a Sharpie. I don't get it. Another thing I wanted to mention is really the manuals and some of the extra stuff that came with the game when you bought it. When you rented them, you probably weren't going to get this manual just because people would lose it. But sometimes people would write like their high scores in the back, like we'll see in just a second. Or they would add like some extra notes and everything in there, which I always thought was really cool. And it's a lot of fun when you find stuff like this when you're getting used games. Now, some of these games, you needed the damn manual to figure it out. Like these two from EA, which are super thick because EA would always like port usually like PC games, like PC RPG or something over. And it would have a super complicated menu system for a console, and you needed this damn thing to figure out what was going on. So if you rented like Rings of Power or Buck Rogers and it didn't come with a manual, you were kind of screwed. These are some of the other things that you would get with, your games as well when you got them. You get the nice like poster, and then you'd get all the promotional stuff. So aside from being in magazines and everything, you'd get a big wall-size poster like this. And it was just really cool. They would also throw in like a number for you to call and waste a ridiculous amount of money by asking for tips on how to play the game. I had never seen anyone actually use the hint lines before until I was in college. And this had nothing to do with video games, but some guy called like the Magic the Gathering hotline to ask for the rules of a game or like the rules of some weird mechanic. I was generally embarrassed that this dude did that, but that's, just me. These hint lines are kind of another thing that I would like to see if they still operate. I'm just assuming that they don't anymore because I really doubt that EA thinks that people are still playing these games today. So thanks for hanging out with me as I kind of wander through all of this nonsense that I've collected over the years and talk about a few of the weird things that I've found on video game covers and some of the stranger labels that I've found. It's not really something that gets talked about a whole lot, and I think it's kind of part of video game preservation to at least keep some of these labels intact and hold on to some of the stickers for the different rental stores that this is probably the only way anybody's going to remember some of those stores is just, having these weird labels on video games, or if you have VHS or DVDs with those on them as well. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you guys have any, memories of rental stores, I'd love to hear them. Anyway, talk to you all later, and have a great day, everyone.